Welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters, the podcast designed to better your sales process. We'll be sharing tools, tips, and techniques, whether you love sales or hate sales. If you've got a product or service to sell and a podcast, you've come to the right place. Now, here's your hosts, podcast strategists, Doug Sandler and JJ Flizanes.
Welcome back to Sales Training for Podcasters. Today's guest is Scott Carson. Scott Carson is a nationally syndicated radio and podcast host of the popular Note Closers Show podcast, with millions of listeners each month. He has been an active real estate investor and entrepreneur since 2002, focused on the niche of distressed mortgage investing. For the past 10 years, he has been helping real estate investors and entrepreneurs create wealth through his teachings and strategies. He is a highly sought-after speaker and podcast guest with thousands of speaking appearances at events across the country. He's also been featured in many media outlets, including Investors Business Daily, The Wall Street Journal, and Inc.com. He spends his free time traveling to new places and making memories. He calls Austin, Texas, home. Welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters. We have Scott Carson with us today. Scott, welcome.
Hey, I am honored to be here. And you know what? Thank God for Zoom that we can hang out virtually, because I'm used to hanging out with you guys in person and cracking up. So we'll have to do that a little bit today, huh?
Absolutely. I really appreciate this format to be able to connect with you and other people that we don't get to see in person. We know we don't really live close together anyway, but it is nice we've met in person and to keep this going. You know, when we thought about sales training for podcasters, and the goal of the show, again, is to address both sides of the spectrum. People that love selling, but when they're on their podcast can't seem to kind of do what they think they need to do, or the results aren't there. But it's also for the people that hate selling and sort of bridging that gap and making their podcast successful. So Doug and I thought of you, of course, and we wanted to bring you on because you do not have any fear of selling. We know that, but you have also, different ways that you go about doing your selling. And I love what we talked about before we started recording today. And so maybe we can touch on some of that, because we're really here to help people deliver their goods and services, their messages, and whatever they're trying to do successfully and through podcasting.
I want to start. Can I ask Scott?
Yeah. Go, Doug, go.
I'm going to ask Scott the leading question. All right. So literally 10 minutes before we had you on the air here, Scott, I said to JJ, of all the people that we're going to interview, and how many people do we have lined up, JJ? Like 15 people that are in this initial launch of episodes. I said, of all the people that we have lined up, Scott probably has the least resistance to selling. And then I started thinking about, well, why is that? And I don't really know why that is, but it just seems like it. So talk about your relationship to selling in the old school sense. I know you're a little younger than me, but at the same time, we still have the same methodology. I mean, you have no problem, at least I don't think that you do, talking to people about adding your services into their their skill, or adding your services into whatever they're purchasing, or having them invest in you. Where does that come from for you? What's your relationship to selling, and where does it come from?
It doesn't come naturally. I don't think anybody is a born salesman right out of the womb. Hey, buy my stuff. I think you've got to develop it. And I've been very fortunate. Prior to my entrepreneurial journey, when I was working for companies, I had really great sales trainers. I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car for a while. This has got a great sales training program. Verizon Wireless, I was the number one sales guy in all of Texas as a cell phone slinger back in the day before I got into banking. And banking and finance, I teach you a lot of this stuff as well, how to say it, how to interview, and really how to listen is really what makes one of the better keys to sales. Is if you listen to what your audience or what your client is telling you, they'll tell you what their hot buttons are, and then you just need to develop your pitch or develop your sales routine into either solving that problem that they have an issue with, or saving them time or money along the way. Those are always the three biggest things. So you have to learn it. It's not an acquired skills. But I want to throw this out to everybody. Wouldn't you rather have somebody pay you for your counsel and your experience versus listening to you and then go find somebody else to pay the money to? That's the thing that was drilled into my head earlier on when I got into really real estate investing and education, is I had some really great trainers there that taught me the ropes when I was just starting off, seeing great people speak from the front of the room. And I kind of compare that to podcasting in a different fashion. I'm a public speaker. I speak all the time, and podcasting has really become that number one aspect of things. So I just kind of have evolved that over time. Like I'm not afraid to get in front of an audience, whether it's my audience or somebody else's, and offer something of value, because I truly believe in what I'm offering is going to add value to somebody's life or their business. And I think that's, JJ, you and I talked about that a second ago, that you don't like to offer anybody up something that you haven't used it, you don't trust it, and you believe in it. And I think that comes across in podcasts. You have to believe in what you do. You have to have faith, and don't just sling shit to sling it. You really have to believe in what you're offering up, and it's going to add value.
I love that. I love the fact that, believe. I don't know if I know we touched on it on other episodes that we have recorded, JJ, but I don't know that we really stressed it as much as Scott is stressing it right now. But even with the belief that your product is something that's good, you still have to have a good relationship with money in order for you to have a conversation about selling, because ultimately hey, you trust me enough to give me a portion of your income that's going to come into my world, and it's going to pay my vendors and my people and all of that stuff. What's your relationship with money itself?
I think it's the root of all good.
I'm with you. Look, you're preaching to the choir here with me.
Well, but we all have bills to pay. And I think you have to look at, too, what you're offering to what your audience is. That's the thing, is if your audience is doing hobbies and whoever you're networking to, and their buying process or their buying skills is something low value, you can't go out and offer a $12,000 package or something to them if they're used to paying like $99 or something that they get cheap. So you have to fit your price point and whatever your offering is to kind of the audience out there. Now, I heard somebody mention years ago that, hey, I like, this guy, he liked to focus on expensive hobbies because his listeners were used to paying high dollar for things. And so that's what you have to know and kind of do that. I embrace it. I don't mind offering stuff up because I know they're going to get a bigger bang for the buck. I do believe that if you're going to be pitching something, it's okay to pitch yourself. I think you should be their number one sponsor for your podcast is you and your services and all your offerings. But you also have to build trust. And I would rather build trust over time, not try to go and hammer somebody across the head, buy now, because that's going to turn people off. I think society these days doesn't want to do that. They want something that they can see if this person is going to deliver, if it's a right fit. I'm not the right fit for everybody, and I'm not afraid to tell you that. Hey, I don't think we're going to be a fit, whether you're not a fit for me or I'm not a fit for you. Let's split and be friends and go that route. But I think a lot of people, they get into it, say, hey, I want to offer high-end coaching or high-end dollar offers right off the bat. If you haven't built trust along the way with smaller dollar values, whether it's $1 for an ebook or $1 for an opt-in or something like that, and then building it up to something that's $50 or $100 or $500, and then to a higher price ticket, which is usually something $2,000 or higher, you've got to build value in those lower tiers, not only to give you time to kind of hone your craft a little bit, but also so that your clients and people that sign up for that, they really get to see and like and trust you with what you're offering along the way. And then they're willing to why wouldn't I buy your stuff? I've already bought you in the past. And you've heard the saying said that it's always easier to keep an existing client versus going out and prospecting for new ones. So that's always been my big proponent. Has been beating my head when it comes to my relationship with money. When it comes to sales, is like, listen, start small and work your way up. And that way you've kind of got a price point that fits every budget or every type of client for you.
It's coming from the person who's selling big budget things, who's selling real estate, right? And big budget things. I hear you on that. And I agree in terms of the know, like, and trust factor. And what we've been kind of asking people to share is if they have a sales style and like a focus. And so for you, it would be, like Doug said, the believe in your product, right? Believe in that you're helping somebody. But is there any other part of like your style? I'm going to add in one other word that I think describes what I've heard so far. And what I know about you is like you play the long game. And whether that be know, like, and trust or just timing, whether it be trends or whatever's going on in the industry for you, I'd say long game and the believe in what you're selling. What would you say to your style?
No, like, and trust, I think is to do with it. And I believe everything's a long game. Not everybody is usually going to buy the first minute they meet you or hear from you. Was it the association? Was it the American Marketing Association says that 80% of sales comes after the fifth contact? And that fifth contact could be, the fifth time they've heard you or seen you in a different place, or they've seen an offering or seen you on video. People aren't always going to fall over, their legs up in the air and holding their credit card out for you to swipe my card now the first time they hear from you. You have to realize almost everything is a long game. And I see a lot of podcasters and a lot of entrepreneurs that get frustrated because I have the greatest product or the greatest podcast in the world. Why aren't you signing up now? I'm like, you're brand new. You haven't built that trust factor if you're brand new. So That's the big thing. Another thing is you have to look at your competition, your peers in the industry. I'm 43. I'm considered kind of the new guy in my niche. There are people that have been around for 30 years in my niche of real estate investing. And they've even come up to me and said, well, Scott, your generation believes in give, give, give. My generation comes from the old school where we don't give away everything. And I'm like, well, it's the 21st century. If you're still trying to sell clients like it was in the 20th century, you're outdated. And I take the philosophy from a book that I read, What Would Google Do? Came out about, 10 years ago, and talking about how Google, when they were first announced, they kind of gave away their platform. They encouraged people to create apps and other things on their platform that would work well with their clients. And so I've kind of taken that philosophy with my podcast. I mean, we give a lot of information that nobody else does. We give a lot of secrets. We give a lot of resources that other people charge for. And we get a lot of people that come into that have followed me for 6 months and like, okay, I'm ready to sign up now for something big because I heard you say something, I researched it and found that you were truth, and you were truth and truth. And then others, your peers or competitors, didn't release that information. They wanted me to sign up for something from the get-go. And so I'm like, that's my philosophy. Let me build your trust, because what I'm going to give you over 6 months of videos or podcasts is just going to deliver value. It's not going to add anything to my bottom line initially, but I know when you do want to go and you're ready to pull that trigger, you're going to come to me first, and it's going to be a valuable relationship. You're exactly what you're going to get. You know that I'm basically I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass trying to pitch you on something. I'm like, hey, here it is. If you want to sign up for it, great. If you don't, hey, no problem. And we'll just I like working with the people that want to work with me. Those that don't, I'm fine with that too. I think that's also an important aspect of sales training for sales is not everybody is your client. And some of the best feelings I've ever had has been firing those PITAs. And you know what I mean by PITAs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Pain in the asses, right?
We've all had a couple of those.
We've all got those.
Client list, yeah.
Yeah, and there's always this inner struggle with if you need a closing, you got to pay bills, put bacon on the table. We all go through that early on. Like, I really need to close a sale. This guy or gal may not be my daily fit, but they're willing to sign with me. And you have to make your own decision. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and take them, but then also there are times they're like, listen, you're just not a fit. I got a bad feeling. You got to trust your sixth sense that God gave you. Trust your gut feeling and go from there a lot of times too.
So I'm curious, and you're 100% right. I can think back to those clients that we, struggled to get in the beginning, and then it's like, oh my gosh, why did I even bring this client? It's like, because they've been the biggest pain in the ass ever. I mean, you try to love up on all your clients, and you try to meet them where they are, and you try to support them. And some clients you just can never please, no matter what you do with the tools that you have. Not because you deliver your services poorly, but because maybe what they were looking for is slightly different than actually what you have as your deliverables. And trying to bend your products or services into the world of your client sometimes isn't the best way or the easiest way to support your client. And it certainly isn't a great way to support your team in-house, because then they end up just cursing you out every time they have to deal with the client because you promised something that you can't deliver. So don't do that. Don't do that. So I want to go back to the beginning of your sales career. Whenever you recognize that what you are doing kind of involves selling, when did you realize that selling, because you've been highly successful at what you do, when did you realize that selling was a gift that you had? And then what advice would you give to that younger self to help you get into that space a little bit faster?
Going back to like 2002, 18 years ago, almost to the month now that I think about it. I was working for Verizon Wireless, and they had great sales training. And I worked at this little kiosk in the mall. Okay. One of those little kiosks out in the middle. And I set the record for most activations and most renewals for the entire state of Texas from this little small kiosk on the north side of Austin, Texas, at this mall. And it was because, they actually interviewed me. The president, or not the president, but the regional manager called me into his office, gave me an award, and then picked my brain for like an hour and exactly what I did with every client. And I'm like, well, I followed the script. I followed others that you gave me, and I just followed the script. And I think that is really hard for a lot of people, because we're just kind of just throwing spaghetti against the wall a lot of times if you don't have any training.
That's so old school. It's like, that's exactly how I learned. Follow the script, follow the system. Some people have systems. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Yeah, keep going, man.
But following the scripts, and then just don't be afraid to ask. Don't say no for somebody when they haven't even told you that. And I think so many people say no ahead of time. Like, oh, they're not going to be on my podcast because they're too busy. Or, oh, I'm not going to give them a phone call because he or she's too busy. That they don't have time for me. Don't say that. Quit saying no. Let them tell you no. Let the client tell you no themselves. Well, they're not going to sign up for it because of this and this. Well, give them a chance to say no. Because it's a quote that somebody caught me saying, the only thing you guarantee by not asking or not trying is failure. That's the only thing that you guarantee if you don't ask or don't do. You're going to work at things, practice. I mean, I used to practice in front of the mirror with my pitch. I mean, I've had friends that in other businesses that when I was first doing my first round of calls or doing other things, they would hear me from the other room and they're like, there's nobody in there. Like, Scott, are you okay? Do you have multi-personality disorder? I'm like, no, I'm just practicing in front of the mirror, practicing my pitch, practicing what I'm going to say to my potential client, and come up with objections in my head, and then work through those objections so that it's not a surprise to me. And I think that's a big thing if you're going to offer something. A pitch, practice. Don't just try to throw it out there and ad lib it and then go by fly by the seat of your pants. Now, some people are good at that. I've gotten good at that because the fact I've practiced so much in the past of things, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it's so funny. You mentioned so many words that I was talking about yesterday. Who'd we interview? Oh, Joe Fear. We were interviewing yesterday, and Lou Diamond the day before, I think, and we were chatting about some of those old school words. Those old school words like pitch and close and prospect. And for a guy like you, those words have no negative connotation. You just are attached. You see the word, you can feel the word, and you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say it. And so many people that are probably in our community right now, and this is not a negative statement, but so many people in our community have a negative perspective of those words because of their relationship to the selling game. So let me go back and just re-ask the second part of that question is, what would you say to yourself? And maybe you answered it by saying practice, but what would you say to the younger self of yours to get into that space where you're comfortable in the sales process earlier on in your career?
Embrace the suck.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When you start off at something new, I don't care how old you are. When you start something new, we all suck.
It's so uncomfortable, though. It's so freaking uncomfortable.
It is, but you don't grow hiding out in your comfort zone. You got to get outside your comfort zone. Got to do the things that aren't comfortable because that's the only way you get ahead. I would also, I think it's most importantly, is be a little bit more coachable. Listen to those that are at a point where you want to be. And they'll save you so much issues. I think we're all, as younger selves, we're a little, what did I say here? We're too cocky versus being coachable sometimes. So if you listen and talk to the people that are at a position or a success level where you want to be, ask them and shut the hell up and let them and give you all these gold mines, all these nuggets of knowledge of how they overcame obstacles, and it'll actually boost and increase your learning curve a lot faster too. So that's the thing. Embrace the suck, and talk to people and really listen to what experts or professionals in your field are doing or have done, and how they overcome those obstacles along the way.
All right, I'm going to get woo-woo for a second because I think I remember your birthday. I feel like you're a water sign. What's your birthday, Scott?
I am Gemini, May 28th, yes.
Oh, you're Gemini. No, you're not water, you're air. Okay. All right.
Some would say full of hot air, too, on that point, but hey.
Well, sometimes, you have the gift of gab. That's part of a Gemini thing and the thinking thing. And so when I was visioning you at the kiosk, right? And having just that idea of, the script or repeating or listening, or it's almost for some people who hate selling, part of it is that they take it personally. They take it as rejection of who they are or what they're selling. They're not that good. Why would you invest in me? The root cause of some sales phobias has to do completely with self-worth, and maybe not as much with selling someone else's product, but selling their own. And you did a lot of, and you still do a lot of, none of this, that I know of, right, is yours. You're selling a thing. It's not you. It might be your method. It might be your information, but it's something outside of you. Do you find that you feel like it makes it easier for you to have that sort of detachment from a no?
Not really. I had it grained in my head that no doesn't mean no. It means not now. And I can't tell you how many times that was ingrained in my head. No means not now. And for every no you get, you're closer to a yes. And so that was the biggest thing is, okay, what if I make a sale and it makes me $3,500 on a sale, how many no's do I need to get to that yes? And you're going to get better and better and better. And that closing ratio is going to get a lot better with your prospects as long as you know the numbers. And I think you have to know the numbers is what it comes down to. No, I don't take no as a negative. It just means not now, follow back up with me. And that's okay. People are all going through their own different things. And we don't know exactly what's going on behind closed doors or mentally or financially speaking these days. So, I always just like, hey, great. I'll be around when you decide that you're ready, I'll be here to help you out. So no, just doesn't mean it's totally what it means to me. Just not now.
The other thing I want to add to what Scott is saying, and I'll just disagree gently with you, JJ, is that, and I know that he does have this amazing service that he offers, but I think Scott really does sell him. I think that part of it is you really have to trust Scott. You're buying in some cases a distress, just in a total 35,000 foot approach, Scott, in a couple of sentences, what do you do for a living?
I buy and invest in distressed mortgages from banks and hedge funds. So we buy the debt, especially discounted debt where somebody hasn't paid on their mortgage. We buy that mortgage from a bank, become the bank, and then we try to work that out with the borrower. And then we have an educational platform and coaching program that teaches investors how to do that as well. Okay.
So in many cases, we're dealing with digital stuff. I mean, of course there is a property attached, but we're not talking about like delivering a car to somebody's front yard and putting it on the driveway and saying, here's your wonderful car. We're talking about stuff that the only connection that Scott has is that trust that he has built through the relationship. Again, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I mean, don't you you have to build trust in doing what you do, right?
Well, specifically, yeah, I 100%. And in the real estate space, especially on the educational side, it takes a lot more because I think everybody has gotten burnout and going to those hotel conferences or the meetings, and it's hey, for $9.95, you too can be a foreclosure expert. You just have to run to the back of the room and sign up today. And I'm kind of the anti that. I mean, I do some of that, like, hey, if you want to sign up for it, great. But I don't browbeat and beat people over the head for the most part. Unless they've attended my event for the 12th time and not doing anything. But you get what I'm saying is that you have to be different. You have to find your image. You have to find your message, and it's okay. Initially, I think it's important to repeat, and you can kind of replicate what others are doing, but you still have to add your flavor to it. So yes, when people say no, don't take it personally, and realize that you just have to keep practice. I mean, I've got pitches that I could do in my sleep. I've had the power go out at a conference room or a big conference, and the power went out, and I still continue to give my pitch word for word. It's still sold in the black dark of a hotel room. Okay. And people were laughing. And I think that's one of the most important things is it's be yourself. People will like and trust you because of you. They don't want to, I'm not trying to be Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, or Kevin Harrington, Mr. Wonderful, or anybody else. I'm just Scott Carson. I'm the big goofy guy that likes to have fun and is just a straight shooter. And, hey, great. If I'm not your cup of tea, no offense taken, and that's okay.
Hey, we've talked a couple of times with some of the guys and girls that have been on have we had any women on the show yet, JJ, aside from you?
Karen Briscoe.
Oh, that's right.
Karen's great. 5-minute success podcast. Yes, Karen's great.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You guys have probably connected, Scott. There's a difference between marketing and selling. And, we all want to be able to market to the point where we have, warm leads coming in the door, people that are actually calling us or connecting with us through email or however they're connecting with us through a opt-in to some to some landing page or something. That's always the easiest way to go. Where would you rate yourself in your business with how much of your business is marketing? So talking to warm people, inbound marketing, talking to people that are calling on the phone versus you're actually getting on the phone or on Zoom, literally with a cold, somebody that's never ever heard of you, and do you have a minute? So what percentage of your business is that versus the warm leads coming in the door?
2 years ago, we really changed up a lot of stuff where I was not afraid to do outbound calls to people. I mean, I still do outbound calls to banks about once, one Wednesday every month where I'm making 50 cold phone calls to bankers. And what's funny is I do it via Zoom. So I'll have 50 to 70 potential students watching me do this and seeing the conversations and either seeing me get hung up on or they're hearing what my conversation is. I had one guy tell me to F off last month, which is kind of funny. And they see me.
Where does the conversation go to the point where you've actually had somebody to tell you to F off? Because that's got to, how quickly does it get there?
Oh yeah,
that's
totally. It's like hi, my name's Scott Carson. I'm calling to see if you're the right person at ABC Bank that handles your distressed notes. Or just ABC Mortgage may handle your distressed. Oh, we don't have to go. Fuck off. I'm like, okay, somebody's having a bad day. And it's those are rare and few and far between. But I bring that up because so many people will market. They do their first round of marketing with either a video or a podcast, or they'll do an email blast out to their list. And we may have a great open rate and people are starting to respond, but we focus on that one person who's ugly. That person says, "Oh, what do you know? You can't sell that. What are you trying to do? You're not an expert at that." Yeah, nobody's an expert starting off at. But people mentally, and this maybe goes the woo a little bit, is I always encourage those emails because that shows me like, okay, I must be doing because they took the time to be ugly to me versus just hitting the unsubscribe button. And I pray for those people. Okay. In Texas, we have saying, "Oh, bless their heart." You know what I mean?
Right. Which is so funny because it's really like it's mean in a way, right? But the way it's said sort of, it's very Gemini. It's very like that two-faced, like, "Oh, bless his heart." And what I'm saying is, "Oh, go F off." Right.
Exactly. Well, kind of a little bit, but here's the story. So I don't mind ruffling feathers. I think it's a good thing to ruffle feathers. And I poke fun at myself first. So people know if I screw up, I'm the first to make fun of myself. All right. And so a couple of years ago when the whole 50 Shades of Grey series was coming out, the books and everything like that, 50 Shades of Grey. So I did an email marketing piece called 50 Shades of Notes. Okay. And I said in my email, and I hadn't read the books or watched the movie. I just figured what it was. I sent like an email. I said, "Do you feel like your borrowers have a ball gag? Do you feel like you need to spank your investors? Do you feel like you need to be punished?" And so I sent this email kind of poking fun about the movie and stuff like that. I sent it out. Huge open rate, like 35% open rate. Huge. People loved it. They were laughing. And then I had 3 people that responded back to me negatively, like the whole F off. "Oh, you're not Christian. How would you say that? Unsubscribe me." And I took it a step further. I was like, okay, never say ugly things to me and leave your mailing address in your email signature. So I went on Amazon and I ordered all 3 books and I had them shipped privately to all 3 individuals. It's a way of kind of getting back a little bit at them. But what I'm trying to get at, I think more so than anything else, is encourage those no's, because especially if you get people that are no and ugly, you must be doing something right to ruffle some feathers, to make them stand up and pay attention to what you're doing.
So do you have any strategies though for that in terms of, I'm like you now, I wasn't like you before. When it comes to selling your own services and coaching and, your ideas and creating your own products and programs, especially for the feelers and the woo-woo people who don't really feel comfortable selling, that first criticism, that, it's hitting a wound in the person. That's the bottom line. Anytime you get triggered by anything, it's in you. It's not the other person. There's a mirror. But sometimes through work, personal work, you can definitely overcome that. And through the work I have done on me, in order to be able to get that, I now can see clearly, but not everybody can, that when someone's criticizing me, especially if it's from the podcast, I don't know you. I'm not talking about you. I've never met you. So if I'm striking a chord, that's something within you. And I see it as a catalyst. And I see it as, oh, great. Because I'm not a fluff kind of person. I'm like you, straight shooter. I call it as it is. I see it as it is. And I'm going to tell you about it. And if it's uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but I'm about change and growth. And if you're not ready to grow and change, I am not for you either. So did you ever have in that beginning, times where a criticism or somebody who said something bad would affect you, and then you had to overcome that?
Yeah, I think we all go through that. And yeah, I mean, it hurts, but and that's, I think, what's so important to have coaches and having people that you can reach out to. Because I think that's one of the most important things you can have is somebody who's been through that before. Because let's look at, we live in such a negative society these days with social media. You've got somebody that's upset about everything. And it doesn't matter what, you're male, female, gay, lesbian, transgender, black, white, Hispanic, whether you're Republican, Democratic, old, young, somebody out there is going to get their panties in a wad no matter what you do. Okay. And you have to kind of embrace that. And you have to build a tougher skin. But the most important thing is reaching out and having really some support group, people, peers, mastermind, coaches that can help you talk you through that. Because there's times that like, oh my God, this guy was so ugly. They didn't like me. They said I wore too much Under Armour on my videos. I had somebody say that one time. I chuckled. But you have to. That's the most important thing to say is.
It's like somebody saying to you, JJ, what you did a cooking video.
Oh my God, the hairnet.
Oh my God,
why don't you have a hairnet? I'm like, it's a video and I'm not serving you the food. Are you kidding me?
It's like the same people that when you have a live event and you pass out the manual, they come up in the first 5 minutes and they tell you all the spellings on the book. I hate that. I'm like, really? It's printed out. What am I going to do about it now? Thank you, but don't bother me. It's the most important thing to have following. I mean, I've had like Steph right now. Steph is my rock, and she's one of the few people that I vent to. And you should always vent uphill. Shit should flow uphill, not downhill. So when you have those bad things, like I said, reach out to your coaches, reach out to your people that support you, that are your biggest cheerleaders, and focus on them. Greg Reed, who's the author of Think and Grow Rich and 3 Feet from Gold, has been a mentor of mine for years. He taught me the concept of the 30-30-30 rule, basically, or 33-33-33 rule, that when you're out marketing and selling and doing other things, there's basically 3 groups of people. The first third group are your friends, families, colleagues, people that like and trust you. They've known you for years. They love you. Okay. Then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have a third of the audience out there that's going to hate you no matter what you do because of your skin color, your hair color, your sex, age, whatever your weight, whatever you're wearing, whatever. They just hate you because they have a dark soul of a hole, or a dark hole for a soul. Okay. Too many times when we do something and we're marketing, we focus on that negative group versus focusing on the group that loves us. And then on the middle group that don't know us, they're on the fence. And so the sooner you can get to the point, like, listen, I'm focused on the people that love me and the people that don't know me that I can sell to. Forget the people that are ugly. Thank you for being ugly so I can block you. I can unsubscribe you. I can remove you from my audience so I can focus on more positivity and go forward. Because it's easy these days to jump in a Twitter rant or a Facebook rant, and that doesn't help anything. All it does is encourage that person who's ugly. It feeds their negativity, and it just takes good energy away from you going and accomplishing more and focus on that. So it's not easy at first. You really got to network and talk with people and have a support group of mastermind or peers or coach that can really help you go and help you understand what's going on with that, and realize that somebody out there is pretty much just having a worse day than you are, and you just got to pray for them. Bless their soul.
Well, yeah, I heard it differently when I heard it that 10% of the people will love you no matter what you do, and 10% will hate you no matter what you do. And when I kind of put that in perspective for myself early on, before I started the podcast, it was sort of after a family situation had happened with me. And I asked myself, how did I manifest this? And when it came to, well, I'm building a thicker skin. When I'm able to see the truth of what's going on, that it really has nothing to do with me, then how you deal with it or how you internalize it will change. So I love that you had a 33. I think that feels like a little too much. I don't want 33 people to hate me, but I understand the neutral part is, yes, I'm going to focus on the people who love me or the people who don't know me, and the rest of them. It is a great learning opportunity. For more information on how to deal with that, please visit Spirit, Purpose, and Energy podcast, because we go through how to deal with all that on an emotional level. Now, I want to come back to, because people who are listening to this, Scott, you've given so much great advice about the selling process. I want to talk about you and what you sell. And I want to talk about your podcast and going from selling not on a podcast to how the podcast has changed, increased, enhanced, or, I mean, I don't think it slowed you down. I know the success you've been having, but let's talk about, what you're doing in the world so people can hear and have some perspective.
I want to add one last thing to that last moment. You will never have anybody above you or greater than you talk bad about you. It's always going to come from people that are beneath you or jealous of you.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so what do I sell? That was the question now that I've gone blank now?
Yeah. Well, because people, are listening to this and you have a lot of sales background, but let's put this in real time in terms of what you're currently selling and how you're selling it offline and on the podcast.
Yeah, so I have I have two, really kind of three things that we sell. We have our high-end coaching, which is $15,000 a pop for you and a partner for an investor. But we basically, that's our end product, basically. It's where we kind of look to get people to. But we start off, we have a nuts and bolts training that's like, for 3 days, it's $600. That's kind of the nuts and bolts training. The downsell from that is a 1-day class that we try to get people to opt into, kind of the Cliff Notes version of what I train. Because mine is different. What I'm teaching in real estate, distressed notes, is not the same thing as people watching Flip This House or HGTV. And that's where a lot of people thinking about real estate investing. It's like, oh, I'm going to go buy a foreclosure, or I'm going to go be a landlord. That's not what I do. So the whole process basically starts off with people either opting into my website or on to listening to my podcast or subscribing to my YouTube channel. I throw a pretty big net and try to share my podcast and message and what I'm teaching just about everywhere, with the goal of getting people to either sign up for $1 for my free book. That leads to hopefully them signing up for a webinar we do every Monday night for free. It's just basically Note Night in America. We've been doing it for like 7 years straight now. Almost every Monday night I show up and we just deliver an hour worth of value. It's free to anybody who wants to join in. But then we get them to opt into that 1-day class. They like that. Then they opt into the 3-day class. They get a lot of nuts and bolts. Some people will run with it and go from there. And then others want more of a big helping hand. And that's where we say, okay, then sign up for our one-on-one coach. That's on the educational side. And of course, we do investments and real estate investments on the distressed note side. So if somebody doesn't want to end up doing the business themselves or learning from it, they will often write us a check and we'll go do it for them and pay them a good return on investment. So, I was like many people, I started speaking. I'd speak at real estate clubs. I was traveling. I'll get back to 2010 when everything was hitting the fan in the Great Recession. That's a prime time for us debt investors because everything was on sale back then. So I literally I was living in Austin, doing stuff here in Austin. I sold everything I owned. Sold my house, sold my furnishings. I'd gone through a divorce. So I sold everything except my truck and my dog. Okay. And I said, let me just plan to hit the road and go out on the road and travel. And I'm a big baseball fan. Planned this trip March of 2010. Was on the road April 1st, got opening day in Arlington for the Rangers. And I planned this trip across the country to hit 30 ballparks in like 30 weeks and just kind of going along the way. Well, I wrote this down and I kind of put it out there. I mentioned it somewhere in a blog or a YouTube video or something like that. And my email just blew up. I started getting people in real estate investment clubs and networking events and events reaching out to me and said, hey, we see your blog and articles, stuff like that. Would you like to come speak to our group? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Because I was one of the few people that was doing videos and just doing free webinars talking about distressed debt when it was really kind of brand new for most people. And so I was like, yeah, I'd love to come speak. When do you want to? And almost every event, I had like 6 in the first 2 weeks reach out to me, and all 6 of them were in different cities, and they all lined up perfectly. I said it's divine intervention. All lined up perfectly when I was supposed to be there to watch baseball games. And I was like, okay, God's telling me something here. And so this 30 weeks of traveling actually turned into 4 plus years of speaking all the time. I mean, literally honing my craft. Sometimes I'd speak 4-5 nights a week at different investment clubs. And really, it's kind of like I call it like the stand-up comedian when they go on the road. It's like a touring road show. It's like a grassroots effort. But I really built a solid following initially doing that, but just going out and meeting with people on a regular basis. And that led to a lot of great stuff happening and me being the educator of the year in my field and led to other things. But the market started to change. 5 years ago, I went from doing hotel events to starting to do virtual events via Zoom because I was tired of being on the road 40 weeks out of the year. And it wasn't, my health was starting to get bad. I was a walking zombie. I had sleep apnea and didn't know it. I put some weight on from living like a rock star. Crown Royal and ribeyes were my favorite things, which is probably making JJ cringe right now, but that's okay.
We like both of those things. Maybe in moderation. Maybe not so much the Crown Royal, but the steak. Yeah.
I could drink anybody at the table. But anyway, it wasn't a good lifestyle pattern. So I got to do something different. So I started doing virtual events with Zoom, and those did really well. So I was like 5 years ahead of everybody else with everything that's going on now, and that was doing well. But it's a different sales process of speaking to somebody via Zoom for 3 days versus being with them in person for 3 days. And so I had to hone my offerings, hone my skills, hone my pitches, I guess you could say, or how I offered up my classes, but just trial and error. The first year when I was doing 4 or 5 virtual events, they didn't go as well. But then I had to figure out, okay, what can I add value? How can I grow my audience if I'm not on the road anymore? So I started an online conference. We call it Note Camp. So I actually went out and made a list of all my peers, I guess you'd say my competitors in the industry. And I reached out to all of them and I invited every one of them on this mid-year conference. And half of them took me up, the other half turned me down. And I did that twice a year from 2014, 15, 16, and then 17. Even the people that were my biggest competitors that turned me down, they called me up and asked if they could come speak at my event, which is kind of a nice way to chuckle a little bit when you see your competitors asking you for help. And my biggest competitor even reached out to me in 2018. He's like, I love what you're doing marketing-wise. Can I hire you to do my marketing? And that was a really bittersweet thing. And I'm like, oh, that's an honor. Thank you. But no, I'm going to turn that down. And right about that time, I thought about doing a podcast. And I'd had a couple of my students, and one guy worked for me. Another one was a deadbeat borrower of mine that became one of my most successful students. And they started a podcast and were doing really well. They got to 100 episodes in their first year and a half and doing well. And I had people come to me and say, you should do a podcast because you got all these videos and webinars you're doing. I'm like, nah, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. And about a month later, I'm talking with one of the guys that started the podcast. And they told me they were going to stop doing their podcast. And I was like, that's so stupid. I thought to myself, you got all this media and all this marketing. Why would you do that? Yeah. And, and I remember the day we were in the Dominican Republic at a wedding that I was officiating for a buddy of mine. And I remember Steph and I looked at each other immediately and we made contact like, hey, you got to start a podcast. And so the minute I get home, like the next week, I call my buddy Tom Hazard up, and he'd been trying to get me to do a podcast because he could do the stuff for me. All I got to do is record it and throw it up there. And sure enough, I said, okay, let's crank it out. And, I just started throwing it up on a daily basis, not throwing up, but doing episodes.
When did you realize, Scott, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Let me just ask a question, because those that are in our audience that are podcasters themselves already and kind of trying to figure out, okay, well, when does success kind of happen here? How far into your podcasting did you, now you inherited, it sounds like you either inherited or you purchased a show from somebody else, or did you start
No.
So you started it brand new?
I started it brand new because I wanted it to be my show.
Got it. When did you realize through starting your show, how far into it, Strick and I can go back to, 17 or 18 months with the Nice Guys on Business. And that was a long tail. That was like 17 or 18 months before we hit it in any level of success. And JJ, you spent how long building Spirit, Purpose, and Energy before you really, I know you built a community, but before you started to monetize it, how long did it take you before that started to happen for you?
Well, mine doesn't count because I was podcasting for 18. I say that because I didn't go in trying to make money right away. I went in to test. So, there was some momentum. There was about 18 months of 2 seasons, 350 shows. And then I rebranded. And then when the Spirit, Purpose, Energy went first of the rebrand, probably within a couple of months, actually. I mean, I was getting calls for people to coach right away because it kind of blew up unexpectedly and had nothing to sell anybody except coaching. So for me, again, I didn't know what I had on my hands and I didn't go into podcasting right away to make money. But Scott, I want to hear, for you, when you knew.
Yes. So I've always been doing videos. So prior to me recording the first podcast episode, I had been doing Facebook Lives. I would do Facebook Lives every day at 11 o'clock. So I have my first technically 149 episodes of the No Closure Show was a daily Facebook Live that would go from 8 minutes to 20, 35, 40 minutes, depending on a topic. And I saw that I had basically about 150,000 views on those Facebook Live videos in 5 months. And I was like, we've got something here. And so when we launched the podcast, we launched the first podcast episode was August 20th of 2017. We cranked out, we had about 50,000 downloads in our first few months before the end of the year. And in March, I kind of gave a pitch for my $97 a month membership for it. And I had like 75 people sign up for it in like a week.
Jeez. So it's like, just as you're listening to this, just know that your results will vary.
Yeah.
It's like,
but the thing is I built my basically audience from marketing 150 episodes. That's 5 months. Then you go to March. So basically from October, no, actually, let me think of it. So basically like early 2016 through 2018. So over a year, basically, of cranking out episodes almost daily to get that point. And we ended up, our peak, we got about 100 that pay that $97 a month. So that's a $10,000 a month income just off of that, and a variety of things. And so that's when I was like, wow, that's pretty exciting. Now, I had another experience happen. I was guesting. I really made it a focus to guest on other people's shows. As my opinion, like, listen, if I want to speak, I can't just speak to the same audience. I need to get on other people's audiences, whether it's one person that listens, like their mom, or they got, 1,000 downloads. That's a group of 1,000 people. So I got really serious about being on other people's podcasts. And I had literally, it was I remember it was 1 week, and I don't remember exactly which podcast it was. I was doing so many of them, but I had 5 people call me up in a matter of like a week and a half and say, listen, we heard you on other people's podcast. We want to sign up for your high-end coaching right now. And I'm like, what? You want what? Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, let's start at square one first, okay? And here's the big thing. If you have somebody willing to give a credit card and they're sold, don't unsell them. Just say, just shut up and go that route.
You'll figure out. You'll build the product as you go along.
That's like a lot of entrepreneurs. We're in the plane, we jump out the plane, we build the parachute on the way out. So you just, the biggest thing it isn't the 5 months or the success came from immediately 5 months. It came from me putting in the work day in, day out for a couple years of just building value, building content, and basically going and growing from a guy that was doing some Facebook Live video originally back in 2010. I had a blog called 100K in 100 days that I was doing, just sharing what I was doing on a daily basis as an entrepreneur. Just sharing, hey, here's what I struggled with today. Here's what I did good today. And just share. You got to realize, I planted a lot of seeds. Like Johnny Note seed, I guess you could call me in the note business. But just realize that you're not going to go viral. Gary Vaynerchuk probably said it best. If you get one person to watch your video or to read your blog or listen to your podcast, that's one more than yesterday. And how far do you need to go? If you get one new person per day, the end of the year, you're doing pretty good, and you've built a little tribe and a little following. And that's one of the best things. If people are going to show up on a regular basis, they want to work with you. They want to pay you. They'd rather pay you than somebody else out there. So keep that in mind.
What percentage of your business comes from your podcast? Or is it too hard and too many blurred lines at this point because you market so many different things?
So here's the thing. 2 years ago, after my first years of podcast, we started seeing success. We made our podcast, my podcast, The Note Closer Show, our number one marketing piece. I said, okay, instead of me going out and flying to an event that might have 100, 200 people now, I could just sit at home and either give a couple episodes or I could be a guest on other people's episodes. So podcasting has become the number one thing that we do. Now, we record the episodes, and I'm a big believer that you market every day. So instead of a lot of people waiting to the last part of the day to record something, usually I wake up in the morning, and we're recording something an hour of each day. And that's my initial marketing. It's a podcast, it's a video. I just throw it all together because it all comes from me sitting in front of the mic and sharing it on the Note Closer Show. And people even have started making fun of me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. I should get a t-shirt made from that because people will repeat that back to me. But everything really now is centrally focused on the podcast. That's where people know me from. People follow me. They see my YouTube videos that are the replays of it. They listen to my podcast. I had a coaching student. She said she spent a 19-hour drive driving from like almost the Canadian border down to San Diego and listened to me the entire way.
That's a lot of Scott Carson.
That's a lot of Scott Carson. I'd apologize for making her ears bleed. But that's the beautiful thing about podcasting is you're in people's ears. And the fact that podcasters, when you look at the absorption rate, if you do a Facebook Live video, it's really only around for 24 to 48 hours. If you do and you get like a 1% kind of a completion ratio where people aren't passing through. And then you look at YouTube, which is about 11%, maybe 15% if you're good on average of people completing that YouTube video or watching it. But podcasters, they listen to 86% of the audio. And I saw that from somebody at Podfest a couple of years. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the number one thing. That's the law, that's the moneymaker if you can be in front of their audience, but you just can't be podcasting.
Sound effects and all, baby.
You got to like my sound effects. You know that. Come on, baby. You don't want people running from you scared. It is Halloween area, basically. Steph's downstairs laughing at me.
Just everybody knows you do not need. I don't have a sound effect on this show. You don't have to have a sound effect. You just have to have a belief in what you do and have the right tools to get you there if you want to close some deals. Exactly,
and that's the thing. The sound machine I bought on Columbus Avenue in San Francisco like 10 years ago for like $10 at like a card store, and I take it everywhere I go. And it's just a fun thing to be comical. It's a little bit about my personality, just to get people to laugh, and it brings the thing, brings their walls down. And so just laugh, make fun of yourself, and that's one of the big things too. When people have been ugly about things, like, oh, thank you, I really like wearing black Under Armour shirts all the time. I'm going to wear one now just for you, ladies and gentlemen. But that's just embrace it. I see all these people like, oh, I'm not getting a huge amount of downloads, or I'm not getting a lot of engagement. And then I tell people, double down. I mean, I do an episode almost daily. We're at 640 episodes in basically just over 3 years. We've just surpassed the million download mark across our main podcast and our two kind of spinoffs. Our podcast has now gotten nationally syndicated that I pay to be on radio stations in 17 different markets across the country. And so I realize, most importantly, in today's world, we're all in the media business, ladies and gentlemen. And so if you're going to be in sales, you got to realize, hey, get very comfortable either in front of the camera or in front of the microphone, because that's really where you got to be. And now having a podcast, even though it's still, we got 1 million plus podcasters out there, there's still a ton of opportunity, and it's really becoming like that business card, or that I'm a best-selling Amazon author at 2:35 in the morning kind of thing. If you just stick with it, I can tell you this: when you walk or talk in front of them and say, "Hey, I've got a podcast," oh, I want to listen to it, but you say, "I've been podcasting for 12 years, or a year, or 18 years, or a year. I just surpassed my 100." That says stability, and for people to work with you and to give you their credit card to buy from you, they want you to be there for a long time. And so if start a podcast, be yourself. I love what you're doing on here, JJ and Doug, with all these great people that are doing stuff. And I'm honored to be a part of this, but just stick with it. So many people are flakes these days. If you can just stick with it and stick with it and stick with it, it will pay off tenfold, 100-fold in the long run. You just got to stick with it.
Absolutely. It's about that commitment. And we agree with you 100%. I've got people that drive across country and listen to me the entire time too. So I know what that's like. And hey, I'm honored if people binge my show. I know.
I have people going across the country to avoid me. That's what I'm running the other way.
Quit talking about your ex-wives. Okay, dude, come on now.
I was going to say that too. He just talking about his ex-wives.
Oh, that's true. Didn't think about that.
So Scott, how can people find out? Where do you want them to go to find out more about you and your services and what your offerings and your show?
It's easy. Just go to our main mothership website, weclosenotes.com. That's the easiest thing. Best way to connect with me is there, weclosenotes.com. You'll see the podcast, the Note Closers Show. We've got a Facebook group and stuff like that as well too. But if you go to weclosenotes.com, weclosenotes.com, you'll find everything that we do there, our different podcasts, our training, investments, and all stuff. And just go there, hang out. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm on LinkedIn, pretty much every social media channel as one Scott Carson. But I'm always glad to talk with people and share what we've struggled with and how we overcame obstacles, and then to give counsel, not advice. I think that's one big thing. Advice is like assholes. Everybody has one. So reach for counsel, not advice, everybody. Okay.
Reach for counsel, not assholes. There you go. Very, very good.
That's vice.
Awesome. Scott, thank you so much. It was so much fun and inspiring to hear from you and your journey and to know more about it, because we've never really talked about any of this stuff when we see you. And because the sales conversation is an important one for podcasters. And I think you just injected some hope into people. And I agree with you. Persistence and believe in yourself and double down and like commit to it. Just commit. This is something that can be hugely successful, as it is for the three of us and the people we've had on this show. And if you're listening to this and you're not hugely successful yet, you can be. You just have to do it.
Amen to that. I think that's worth a standing ovation, everybody. That's just awesome.
Oh boy. This is it. Scott's got a spot on the Nice Guys on Business podcast with all of the sound effects. Between him and Strickland, I'm sure we can get a lot of good stuff going on. Thank you, Scott, for sharing your expertise on the show today, man. Appreciate you being here.
Honored as always. You guys, love what you're doing. Love you both. I can't wait for we to hang out in person at some point. But for those that are listening, guys, just listen to what they're doing. And if you get a chance to rate and review, go over and hit the rate and review button for them. Leave them a nice 5-star rating, okay? They got to do that. You're welcome. And that's how we love seeing that kind of stuff. But I'll wait for the check in the mail from you guys on that, okay? All right?
Done.
JJ, you want to take it? We don't have a signature out of this show. You know that? We got to come up with like if you're blah, 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 and you want to do this, then you got to.
And you want to do blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, tune into the sales training for podcasters.
Stay tuned. We'll come up with one, but not today.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
See y'all next week.
Thanks for listening to Sales Training for Podcasters. To get additional information and to access more amazing content that will boost your sales game, visit salestrainingforpodcasters.com. Hey, do us a favor. Rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, thanks for listening.